Hey survivors, how are you? Happy Friday. We made it. It is Friday. I am going to give a few seconds so people can come on. So I'm excited to share my big announcement of my book, The Silent Cries of a Black Girl, is now available for pre-order. So let's give it a few seconds for some people to come in the room, say hey, drop a question. How was everyone's day? My day was a little long. I got home about a little less than an hour ago. And yes, so it's been a day. All right, so I am just going to begin. So like I said, The Silent Cries of a Black Girl, that is my book. My next book, I actually published a book in 2018 called The Journey Continues, Stories of a Survivor. So I'm not going to be on here long, but I want to share some information about the book, where you can find the book, why I wrote the book, who is it for, who should be buying it. I'm going to share all of that information with you, and I'm not going to be long. So let me just start off by saying, in 2018, The Journey Continues was published, and those of you who follow me know that I am a survivor. So I usually introduce myself as survivor, author, mental health counselor, and wellness advocate, right? So in that, you know that I'm a counselor. I'm also a survivor, and I am an advocate for those who've experienced sexual abuse, domestic violence. That is my passion work. So in 2018, I released my first book, The Journey Continues, The Stories of a Survivor. And that was a book that was written in poetry form. And it told a little bit of my story, but it was a lot of poetry. I call it thought-provoking poetry. And then after each poem in that book, there was an opportunity to journal your thoughts. So if you were a survivor and you were picking up that book was really powerful. And my suggestion at the time, and still is that if you're a survivor and you're reading that book, you should not be reading that book all in one sitting. You should be taking your time, reading through the poems, answering the questions, and just, going at your own pace. So that book was released in 2018. It has been 5 years, and now I am releasing under my publishing, my publisher, which is Vine Publishing. I'm releasing The Silent Cries of a Black Girl. So I'm just going to get into what made me publish another book, what made me write another book, what made me actually want to continue to at this work. Because as we know that when we talk about somebody being a survivor, like I said, whether it's sexual assault, domestic violence, that's not really what a lot of people want to talk about. It's like a more of a hush kind of topic, and it's really not talked about in the Black community. I think it's now starting to be talked about more because it's so now prevalent, and it's kind of like in your face. And I don't know if it's just that it's happening more. I think it's more that people are coming forward and being brave about telling their story. So I think it's more of being known, and people are being more brave and they're coming forward. So let me just start with the title, The Silent Cries of a Black Girl. This black girl right here, because it's my story, right? And the silent cries comes from me holding my abuse for not a very long time at my age, but I was afraid to tell, like many survivors are. They are afraid to tell their story because they're afraid of them not being believed. And also, a lot of times we are threatened by the abuser. So in my case, I was threatened by my abuser. So just to give you a little bit of backstory, because I'm not going to say much because you have to get the book if you want to know the full story. I was sexually abused on 2 occasions at the age of 12 and 14 years of age. And I was also threatened by both of my abusers. So and I talk about this in the book, one of the things that every believer wants is every survivor wants is they want to be believed. And that is the biggest fear that prevents them from going forward, is not being believed. So let's talk about the why, right? Why did I write this book? So I wrote this book because as I was doing vendoring events for The Journey Continues, it just seemed like the next step. I found myself talking to people who may have experienced abuse, neglect, abandonment, or they knew someone who was experiencing, who had experienced abuse. And I found myself telling more of my story. Like I said, The Journey Continues has a little bit of my story, but this one is my full story. So I found myself sharing my story more and more. And it got to the point that I was like, this is probably going to be my next book, of me really sharing my full story. So that is the why I decided to write The Silent Cries of a Black Girl. I wanted a title that would represent not only my experience as being a survivor, but many survivors' experience. So when I think of a title that I felt at that time in my life, The Silent Cries of a Black Girl was really kind of summed up of what I was experiencing at the time. So who is the book for, right? The book is for any girl. The title is The Silent Cries of a Black Girl because it's my story and I am a black girl, right? But it's for any girl that want to be aware of the signs of sexual abuse, or those who may have experienced sexual abuse. So that's who the book is targeted. So in the book, I tell my story of my whole journey, of what I had to deal with in dealing with abuse and having had been abused. And then I also give the reader signs of things to look for. One of the biggest things that I talk about in the book is grooming, right? How there is a term of grooming, and we may not have heard about it. I think some people have. And grooming is what the abuser does to earn the trust, to make the victim, and I'm just going to use victim in this situation, more comfortable. So he or she can carry out what they want to carry out. And in my case, it was sexual abuse, right? So the book is really for any girl who wants to be aware of the signs of sexual abuse, or someone who may have experienced sexual abuse but not really sure, because a lot of times we experience abuse or some other forms of trauma and we're not really sure like what it is. And so that's who the book is for. Who should have the book? I've been calling it a book, but I think this is more of a resource guide. It's a guide for parents, caretakers, aunties, grandmas, social workers, counselors, therapists, anyone who has a role in touching the lives of young girls. So whoever you are, even if I did not call your title, right, when I just ran down the list, you should have this book. If you are influencing young girls, if you are working with them, or if you are counseling them, if you are impacting their lives in any way, you need to have this book. Why do I say that? It's a resource. It's a resource. And I wish when I was struggling with all of my feelings, my doubts, my shame, my guilt of having endured abuse, I wish I would have had a tool like this to help me through. So, hey, good evening, how are you? Hey, Jackson. So I wish I had a book or a guide that would have helped me in my whole struggle of trying to navigate and understand all of my feelings having to do with the abuse. So happy Friday, hon. How are you? Hope you had a good day. So if you are in any one of those roles that I called, and as Jackson came on, she reminded me, if you are a teacher, and that's the one role that I did not call before. So a teacher, an administrator, social worker, counselor, parents, of course, aunties, grandmas. If you have any role that impacts the lives of young girls, you need to have this book. There are many of us that work with girls, and we have an impact on their lives, and we have the opportunity to positively influence them. And part of that is making sure that we are aware, right? And this book is definitely a book that will help you recognize the signs. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, because like I said, I wish this was something that I was aware of when I was going through my whole emotional roller coaster, my struggles when it came to dealing with abuse. So I'm going to talk about now, and Jackson, if you have any questions, you could just put it in the chat, hon. So I'm just basically, I am talking about why I wrote the book, who should read the book, why the book is a great resource and who should have it on hand. And even I started talking about the title and where the title came from. So Jackson happens to be one of the people that is going to interview me for my book launch, which will take place on May 28th. I have a selected group of people that I have invited for that event, and she is actually going to interview me for the book launch. So she already read the book. And she's a very fast reader, and so she's very much aware of what the book is about. So what was it like for me to write the book? I actually wrote this book a while ago, right? And it was, some days it was easy, I'm going to be honest. And some days it was really hard. And the reason why I say that is because when I wrote the journey, I had to kind of, go back and relive some of my abuse, right? But for this book, just because this book is my full story, like my whole story of from when it started to it ended to the struggles that I went through in my journey. So it's the full story. It was hard. Some days it was really hard because I had to really go back. Not to say it was so hard to go back, but I had to allow myself to be there and to process those feelings so I could write those thoughts down, right? And as I was going through this process, I took the time to take a break. So I would sit and write, and then about maybe every 2 or 3 hours, I would just say, okay, I needed a break. And depending on what I was working on at the time, that would be it for the day. Like, I had to practice a lot of self-care in writing this book because I relived a lot of these moments, right? And so that's why I say, even when it came to The Journey Continues, as for those who I knew was picking up the book who were survivors, I was like, you can't read this book all in one sitting. You have to give yourself time. You have to pause. You have to process. You have to write. You have to take care of yourself. And that's the same thing I'm going to encourage you when it comes to the silent cries of a Black girl. If you are a survivor and you are reading this book, you need to pause and you need to take care of yourself. You know what you need to do to take care of yourself. Whatever it is that you do, when perhaps if you are triggered or you're having a bad day, I don't know whether it's calling a friend or just, listening to music, but you know what you do to take care of yourself. And so it's going to be the same thing when you're reading this book. And that's what I had to do. I had to know when I can take a break and go back. And I had to know this is enough for the day, sire. You cannot do no more. You need to give yourself a break. So that was my journey in writing this book. I had to be very mindful and remember that I had to take care of myself. And that for me is really hard because when I have my flow and I have my rhythm going on, I don't want to stop. I don't want to stop. Hi, good evening, AC. How are you? I wanted to keep going. But there's so many things that I've learned on this journey of like taking care of myself, that I had to stop myself, even though I wanted to keep going because I was in my flow and I didn't want to stop. I had to remember that I had to take care of myself. So like I said, there's so many things that I've learned even from the release of The Journey Continues, which was 5 years ago, right? I've learned so many things, and a lot of those things I've learned was from connecting and continues to be from connecting with other survivors who have gone through similar experiences that I have. And so one of the biggest things that I want to get out of this book is to continue to build a community of support of survivors. That is something I always do. I try to do that with my workshops, with my lives. I try to have interesting and engaging conversations. not only just about being a survivor, but creating us a community of support. So I want to see the same thing for the silent cries of a black girl. I want it to be so much easy for a survivor to come forward and share their story. And you will be surprised how many people have experienced abuse and have held on to it for years and years and years. So when they talk about normalizing stuff, we need to normalize talking about our traumas, right? And that includes sexual abuse or sexual assault, domestic violence. That includes all of those things. So that's what it was like basically for me to write this book. So with all of that being said, I shared a couple of things. I'm not going to share anything more because you got to get the book. So and this is how I'm going to tell you how to get the book. It is now available on Amazon for pre-order. The book is only $12.99, guys. That's it. It's a resource guide, right? You can order it on Amazon. It should be available on my website within the next day or so. So if you can, please order it from my website. So 2 places you can get the book. Amazon, it is available for pre-order right now. Actually, it was available a couple of days ago for pre-order. And it will be available on my website for pre-order in the next day or so. So that is really all I wanted to share. I'm super, super excited about the release of this book. It is an amazing feeling, just as it was amazing for the journey, but I think this is just like another level of amazing, because I've learned so much since the journey. Thank you. Jackson said it's an excellent resource guide. Thank you so much for that. And that's what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be not just me telling my story, but a guide to help someone else, which is the whole purpose of my work. So you can get it. Amazon.com is available for pre-order. It is the book is launching May 28th, which is actually the same date of my book launch. And it will be available on SayaBHagan.com, my website, in the next day or so. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. It is Friday. We made it through the work week, and I will probably check in with you guys before the weekend is out to share some information. And have a good evening. Thank you, Jackson, for joining me. Bye.